and I'll invite one of our regional coach leads, Aisha Williams from Region 9, to introduce, yes, Aisha. And she's going to introduce our first speaker for the day.
Thank you, Michelle. So much exciting things happening. It's so good to see so many of your faces back again this year. And to the new faces, my name is Aisha Williams, literacy consultant at Oakland Schools and Region 9 coach coordinator. I have the honor of introducing our first researcher and key presentation today from Dr. Alison Fox-Resnick. And to many of you, she may not need an introduction because of the great work that we've already begun to tap into. Alison Fox-Resnick, PhD, is an educator, learning systems designer, and researcher committed to the challenge of designing systems, tools, and experiences for learning that foster transformation of educational practice. As an independent consultant and staff member at the National Center for Research and Policy and Practice, she collaborates with educational leaders and organizations across the country. Alison is a co-author of the recent book, Learning Together, which many of you have gotten a chance to access, Organizing Schools for Teacher and Student Learning, and she lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Let's put our hands together and welcome to the stage, Dr. Alison Fox-Resnick.
All right. Oh, is it working? Yes. Hi. It's so good to be here. It's so lovely to be in this space. I'm really curious because I know I've been in different spaces that some of you have been in. Can you raise your hand if I've gotten to work with you before in some way? Okay. I'm so excited to be in this space. I think some of you may know I've gotten to hang out with the math team for the last 4 years, which has been such a joy. I do love math instruction. It's one of my passions, but I actually am just an elementary education thinker largely, and I like to think about how we create schools that support kids learning across all content areas. So I'm really excited to be here to think about the literacy side of our work in Michigan. For those of you who don't know me, I like to say the different lenses that I bring to the work. I am a researcher, that's up there, that's one layer of my work. I am a learner and a designer and a collaborator at heart, though. That's the kind of work I love to do. I love to think together. I like to puzzle through how do we make something work in this particular context? Because as we're going to talk about today, research provides a lot of information. We still have to make it come to life in our context. That's the work I like to do. I was a 5th grade teacher, and before that, a 3rd grade teacher, actually. And then I spent quite a bit of time as a leadership coach for coaches and principals also. And that was for literacy coaches and math coaches. So I'm really excited to be back in the literacy space today. And then I'm also a Michigan parent. I have a almost 1st grader. He just really figured out reading in the last few months. It's been really exciting. And I also have a 1.5-year-old who is in the stage of like, I want to read 2 pages of this book and then 2 pages of the other book. And then just really look at this page of the book that has the duck on it over and over again. So that's kind of our reading world right now. Here's what we're going to work on today. We're going to think about and try out actually, some routines that I hope you can build into your work that can help you unpack the complexity of teaching practice. And I'm hoping you walk away with at least 2 things, hopefully more. But one is something new you're going to really attend to when you're in classrooms with teachers and think about in relation to their practice. Hopefully there's more than one thing, but I'm hoping you walk away with at least one thing. And then what we're going to walk through is a reflection process I think you can build into your work. We're going to mostly just use your little whatever notepad you have. It doesn't require any additional tools to really think through what is required of teachers if I'm expecting them to engage kids in a certain way in reading or writing. Okay? But I want to ground us first in who really matters in this. So will you picture one child you know who will be learning in Michigan schools this coming year? Just picture them. So I'm thinking about my son. What's something you want to be different for them? We're always trying to make our schools better for kids. What's something you want to be different for that kid in their classroom? Now, if you've worked with me before, you know that this value 5 from the organizational practices is really the heart of what I care about. That if we want more powerful learning for kids to happen, we actually have to change how we're supporting educator learning. We have to make our educator learning as powerful as possible for kids to have the powerful learning we want them to have. And that means if we want children's learning to be different, so that idea you just had about what you wanted to be different for that kid in your life, we have to have educator learning be different too. And that means we have to do learning and learn new ways of doing our own jobs, right? So that's new learning for teachers and leaders. This is the space that I like to think about a lot, and this is the space we'll be in together today. To that end, I'm really excited to introduce this new tool. I think you have it on your tables. I did just want to spend one more minute talking about it, and then we'll get to engage with it in different ways throughout the day. As I said, I've been working with the math team in the state the last 4 years, and we reached this point where we realized we've developed so many tools and we need to figure out a way to put them together as a way of having something to reference as we think about designing our systems for educator learning. So this is how do we design professional learning systems for educators across the state. You'll see there's on each card, if you just kind of flip through, one side is what are some big ideas that matter, and the back side is what are some things you could try. So we're going to dip into this in a few different ways today. I think we'll continue to dip into it in different ways throughout the year. Your math colleagues have had a few more experiences dipping into some of these ideas, so you can ask them about them. I am curious, take a moment to look through, and then, oh, this is not going to be useful. There's no QR code. If you are in the Slido still, does it show up for you? Never had this happen before. Might have to problem solve that. Oh, maybe. All right. We're going to switch gears here. I'm going to go back. Will you show me fist of 5, just glancing at it? How familiar are these ideas to you? Fist would be like, I have no idea. I've never seen these before, but I'm excited to dive in. 5 would be like, I've really gotten to think about these ideas before. I'm just curious. Okay, wherever you're at, that's great. And what I love is I see a mix of experience at every table, so you can kind of help each other as we dig into them. I want to emphasize, I'm going to touch on some of the ideas. There's going to be ideas we don't even get to today, but we will later. This is a resource you can keep diving into. And there is a QR code there for a landing page with more resources for each of the ideas. All right? Okay. So raise your hand if you're getting a new curriculum in a school you're working in this year. Okay. Another question. Raise your hand if in the course of your career you've been part of another time a new curriculum came to a school. All right. Keep your hand up. So keep your hand up, keep your hand up. Keep it up if you feel like, be honest, and there's no right answer here. It really changed what was happening for kids. Okay. Did everyone see what just happened? Okay, so this is the reality about curriculums. We get the box, right? And it's often just yet another tool that results in maybe there's some new words or activities, maybe it stays in the closet, that's real. But everyone basically just keeps doing the same thing. Sound familiar? Okay. Nothing changes actually for what kids are experiencing. There's a potential, though, for curriculum to be a tool that really supports us to engage with kids in a more powerful way. Has anyone seen that happen? Okay, a few people. I want you to bring that knowledge of both cases. You have a lot of knowledge of what leads to it just being basically nothing, the same thing, and what can lead to it actually changing what happens for kids. You have that knowledge. That's what we're going to draw on today, to really think about how do we make sure, as across the state we're having a lot of new curriculum coming in, how do we make sure we're supporting teachers towards that, towards that way where we're engaging kids in actually more powerful ways, so it doesn't just become something that sits in the closet or kind of looks differently but doesn't actually change what's happening for kids. That's our work today. And here's why it's hard. Teaching and leadership practice is really complicated. We're constantly, see if this describes your job. You're constantly juggling multiple competing demands. You often feel there's this urgency, or you feel rushed about having to make decisions. You have to foster and respond to unpredictable human relationships. You have to act within complex and entrenched systems, broader communities, political contexts. Anyone feel seen? Okay, do you think teachers would feel seen by this? Yeah. The thing about this is it makes it so easy to fall into habitual and long-standing ways of making sense of what our jobs are or what we need to do. That's real. This is so hard that it's a lot easier when we have to figure out what to do for the PD tomorrow, or what to do for the coaching cycle tomorrow, or what to tell the principal, or if I'm a teacher, what to do for my literacy block tomorrow. It's a lot easier to say, I'll just do what I'm familiar with, or what the system is kind of giving me the recipe for, right? Really easy. So even when we're trying to do something new, and I want to say study after study has shown this, study after study looking at efforts to change instruction finds that people actually just end up doing the same thing. And this is why, I think, one reason. Our work is really hard. It's really easy to fall into the ways we've always just done things. So a tool we've used in the math world that we're now going to bring into this space, I think some of you have thought about it before, is this tool of thinking traps as a way to catch ourselves from falling into those habits. So thinking traps, and you'll see it's your red card in your design cards. Thinking traps are a way of naming the habitual ways of thinking about learning and educational change that we just fall into. And I want to emphasize they are not about you. They're about what the system told us the recipe was. Okay? They are built into our educational systems and as just the way things are done. So what's key here is they don't work. They're what we always do. They don't work. So go ahead and take a look at the thinking traps in your card deck or design deck cards. Sorry, I need to get the right name. Or you can look up at the screen. Just see if you feel like any of them are familiar. Like you can think of examples of yourself falling into these. I can. Or people you work with. And I want to give you a minute at your tables. Will you just talk about an example that came to mind? Like when you saw one of these, what's that example that popped into your head of like, oh shoot, we do this, or one time I did this, or this principal I work with always does this. It can be anyone. That's the point is actually it's not, these help us name things that are happening that hopefully aren't personal to that person. It's like, oh, that is totally what that person does. That's the trap they're falling into, or that's the trap I'm falling into. I fall into these all the time. They're the scripts we're given for how to do our work, right? So share an example with someone next to you. Okay, let's see if I can do it. Coaching. All right, we did it. Okay, I had to switch mics. Can you hear me better now? Okay. Hopefully this can be a tool that, the idea is this is a tool that just becomes part of your conversations with colleagues. So it's been really amazing to watch it become a norm in our math team, where we call each other out about it. We're like, oh, I think you just fell into a trap. Or we use it as a reflection tool of, okay, we just planned Institute. What traps might we be falling into? Or whenever I'm planning anything like this, I constantly have the traps of, what am I accidentally falling into, because it's the recipe I've been given for how to support educator learning, how to think about educational systems, all right? So what we're gonna do today actually is use it as a way to think about this challenge of how do we make curriculum not just everyone keeps doing the same thing. So let's zoom in on this trap first, number 5. And I want to emphasize, it says high quality here. You could put other words in there. We assume that if the box says high quality or evidence-based or research-based or Common Core aligned or science of reading aligned, and you plug in whatever you want, right? We assume that means that whatever teachers do with it will also be that. Here's how, and I shamelessly stole this from Dr. Rachel Gabriel, who's at University of Connecticut. She compared it to how fad diets are sold to us. Okay, so here's some messages we might hear. Everything you've been told before is wrong. This approach is really different. Even if we've been around for a while, it's basically the same. No one wants you to know this industry secret. This explains why you haven't been getting results. And all those other people, they're going to say their thing is the only thing, and they're going to say anything they can to get your money. Okay? So this is how lots of things are sold to us. I think it's interesting to pause and say how are educational materials or approaches also sold to us in this way. That's where our expertise as educators who've actually been in the classroom is crucial. Okay? So I want to disrupt a little bit something that I think lives in our heads. Maybe this is another trap that's not on our cards. That research knowledge is the absolute truth above our knowledge as practitioners. Here's something I want, so Nell Duke also had something to say about this, right? Here's the thing I want to really sit with for one moment about education research, because it's something that I think is kind of behind the curtain sometimes. Researchers in general study a really small, narrow niche of things. And then even within that, any particular study is even more narrow, okay? So these are just some examples of what someone might study. And these are probably, I want to emphasize, 6 different researchers. And one study is just looking at how do we support student learning of phonics in one-on-one intervention? Okay? Or another study is just looking at how do we support student writing through just how do we design writing tasks? Okay? All of this is really important work. Here's the problem. As a teacher, you have to put all that together. I want to say really clearly, no researcher knows how to do that. Teachers are the one who knows how to do that. You know how to do that. Researchers don't. So that's where we have to use the knowledge from research, but then we have to figure out how to make it work with real kids across a whole literacy block, across a whole day, across a whole year, across a whole K-12 education experience, right? So I just want to name that these offer pieces of the puzzle, but we have to put it together, and that's what makes it so hard. And that's why I get frustrated when things say research-based or evidence-based, because pieces of it are, but how to bring it all together is not. So that's where your expertise really matters and your work really matters. I want to just pause there because that was maybe a big thing I just said. I don't know. Will you just talk in your tables, or if you're online, you can put something in the chat. What's coming up for you? What feels new? What questions are you having now after that little piece there? Okay, coaching. Coaching. I know this is a hard conversation to stop. I am going to ask you to stop it. We could spend the whole day just talking about that, probably. I think this is a really crucial conversation for us to be having across the state this whole year, because of the way that gets missed. That gets missed in the policies too that are now at the state level in our state, okay? So we end up being the ones to carry the load of how do we actually put this all together and bring this to life for kids? How do we support teachers to make sense of this? That's not in the policy. That's not in the law. That doesn't come in the curriculum box either, right? So that's what we want to unpack today. To support it to actually come to life in the way we want it to support that curriculum to actually change what's happening for kids, we have to unpack the complexity of the practice that's necessary, okay? So that's what we're going to think about today. We're going to go through these 6 little routines today. We're going to practice them together. We're going to try them out. They're little short routines that I'm hoping could become part of your thinking as you're making sense of what you need to support teachers with, all right? Let's start with number 1. So the first question I'm going to really encourage you to always pause on is, what do I actually want for kids? And when you do that, I need you to go deeper than what all the headlines say. Okay, we could want kids to pass the reading tests. Great. Please don't stay there. So what I want you to do is find a notebook of some kind. A lot of you already have one. But we're going to start a list. You're going to create a little personal list in the next 5 minutes of your hopes, dreams, aspirations for Michigan children as readers and writers. So just start. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just do an initial brain dump. What words come to mind? What phrases come to mind? Anything counts? What would you write down? So now I'm going to walk through a few ways we might get deeper in this and more specific. As I go through these next little steps, keep adding words that are popping into your head to your list, okay? So hopefully in the next 4 minutes, you're going to have maybe like 10 more words on your list. So you might think, what relationship will they have with reading and writing? What will be their relationship with those content areas? So think about what words you would add now. What role will reading and writing play in their lives? What does that bring to mind? Here's some bullet points from Essential 1. I'm wondering what else that might make you add to your list. So we see that teachers need to create opportunities for children to see themselves as successful, make choices, collaborate, read, write, and discuss in and out of school. What words would you add? There's no right answers here. It's like what's coming up for you is what's really important. Okay, and here's where I want to add one of the tools from our design cards. So one of the ways that can be really powerful, I think, to dig a little deeper into what we want for learners is to think about learning as, yes, of course, it's new knowledge and understanding. It's new things we know. And this is your pink design card if you want to take a look. Of course, it's also things we need to do. It's skills we need to develop. But here's the piece we miss often. This becoming piece. And this comes from learning theory. If you're wanting to get nerdy about it, let me know. We can go deeper. But the becoming piece, the identity piece, the who am I in this piece is the piece we miss. So the question we ask ourselves here is, and if there are any words that come to mind here, write them down. How do we hope children see themselves and their role in relation to reading, writing, learning, the classroom, school, community, society, like any level? How do we want them to see themselves? How do we want them to feel about themselves? What do we want them to think their role is? That's the piece we miss. What words are coming to mind? Add to your list. Now, I want to emphasize learning happens at the intersection of these three things, okay? It's not a sequence. It's not like you know and do and then become. It's a messy intersection of it, okay? So let's take one example. What if my goal is I really want kids to persevere through challenging texts? And this is going to be, this is complex. I could do like 30 Post-its on this, right? I'm just going to do a couple just so you see. So I need strategies for reading challenging texts. I need to know about them. But then I also need to know how, when, and where to use my strategies. That's the doing part, right? Now, we've all seen kids read. We've all tried to support kids with reading. Is that enough? Or do kids also need to see themselves as a reader who can puzzle through things? See themselves, believe that my role as a reader is someone who needs to make sense of what I'm reading. And that this idea that making sense of it can be worth it, right? If I don't think it's worth it, why should I persevere through that challenging text? So this is where becoming, I think, allows us to add a more powerful layer to our thinking about what matters for kids. It helps us say this less tangible underlying thing they need to think about themselves and their role as a learner. So here's some examples of what a kid's becoming or their identity in relation to reading and writing might be. I bet you can think of kids that have had these, right? So my role as a reader or writer is to do what the teacher tells me to do. So just think, what would that make you add to your list? Right? How does this get in the way of kids learning the way we hope they do? And what would you add to your list about what you hope they become? Or let's think about the difference between these. My role as a writer is to copy the structure or format that my teacher showed me. Or my role as a writer is to figure out ways to effectively communicate my ideas to others. Those two learners, we've seen them both. They show up really differently. The teacher can be doing the same thing. The way they show up is different, right? What would you add to your list? What about this one? I've been thinking about this one actually with my husband. I don't know if he's going to like that I tell this story, but he will not stop reading a book. He will complain the whole way through, I hate this book, I don't like this book's so boring. But he has deeply internalized, my job is to finish the book. Okay? We do this, he's still making sense of it, I want to be clear. Sometimes readers think, I read all the words, so I did a good job. When I was a 5th grade teacher, I would have kids that were in that space because of the instruction they'd experienced. They'd say, oh, I read all the words, and I'd say, well, what happened? They wouldn't be able to answer me, right? Because all that mattered in their past classrooms were, did you read all the words? Did you make it to the end? All right? What would you add to your list? What do kids need to see themselves in terms of their role? What's their role as a reader? Okay, here's one I feel really passionate about, especially at this moment. For those of you who were here yesterday, I know it wasn't a ton of you, but we had Dr. Deborah Ball was talking about how we are the only profession that is preparing the next generation. We are that profession. If we don't support this in classrooms, that has major impacts, right? What would you add to your list? All right, here's what we're going to do. I want you to bring your list, get up with your list, find a new friend, and compare your list. And you get bonus points if you add a couple words to your list. All right. Coaching. 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 Oh man, this is a hard conversation to stop, huh? I know. Can you find your way back to your seats though? I know. Oh, I'm so glad. Okay. Again, I want to emphasize, all of these routines are probably conversations you could have for a whole day, right? So we're just practicing them in a short way today. Please be thinking about how you're going to build this into your work, right? Who else might you have this conversation with? What might you do with your lists? Like, are you going to put it by your computer or something? I don't know. Different things are going to help different people, right? But what I want you to do is go into the Slido, and it's working now. Will you put your top 3 words or phrases? I know it's hard to choose, but will you just pick 3? And what's key, because we're trying to do a word cloud, we actually enter them separately. There we go. Your top 3 words. So what I want to emphasize here is this doesn't happen from a curriculum, just how it's written. This happens from how we bring it to life, right? So that's the next, that's the next routine, right? Because we're going to move into that in a moment. Here's what I want to say. Every small move that a teacher makes either nudges kids towards your list or away from your list. Those are in the tiny, tiny moves that we make. Not the what curriculum do you have. It's in the tiny moves that you make in every tiny interaction you have with kids, right? We send messages about who is capable of reading and writing. We send messages about what it means to be a good reader or writer. We send messages about what's worth reading. I was thinking today about how I have this clear memory of reading I don't even know what it was, some fantasy book when I was maybe 10. And my dad said, I'm sure he doesn't remember this. As a parent, I now know we make lots of comments that we don't even think about, right? I think he probably didn't mean anything by it, but he said, why are you reading that? That sent a message to me. I still think about it when I pick up a fantasy book about what's worth reading, okay? These tiny moves we make as grown-ups make a big impact on kids and how they think about themselves as readers and writers. So here's the second routine. We need to think then about, for anything we're expecting teachers to do, how can a teacher enact this? What will they say or do to bring this vision to life? Or, and this is key, we have to actually name this, not bring it to life. Okay? For any tiny snippet of instruction, for any 5-minute part of the day, what could they do that would bring this to life, move them towards this list, which happens over time, right? Not in one moment, but all the moments over time. And what could they do that would really kill it? And what's key here is it's what would they do or say and what might they not do, or say. We have to think about both. So here's what I've done, and you can access this on your table. There's some copies with different snippets, hopefully, of instruction. Are we seeing them? Let me go forward and I can give you the QR code for it. Now you're getting a little preview of what's happening here. There's the QR code if you want it. And don't do this activity, this is later, but just get the, if you want the handout. Or there's a few at your tables to share. Sorry, I should have said that because we're gonna be working together. I intentionally picked little snippets from different curriculum. These are just tiny parts. So go ahead and take a look. If you're at your tables, you can look at both sides with someone next to you, or if you're looking on your phone, you can look there. You don't need to really process them, just see like, what are they? So one's like a phonics thing, one's a shared writing, one's discussing a read aloud. And what I'm wanting you to do is pick which one you might want to focus on. So you probably want to pick the same one as the people sitting next to you. Which one do you want to think about today? We could think about all of them, but pick one you want to think about for this next activity. Okay. If you've picked which one you want to focus on, can you raise your hand? All right. If you haven't, go ahead and pick one. It really doesn't matter. Just pick one. All right. And here's what I'm going to have you do at your tables. There's poster paper. I need one of you to be a recorder, and I need you to get ready by drawing just a simple T-chart on your poster. Sorry. Yep. One per table. Okay. Coaching. Coaching. Thank you. Okay. I'm realizing that covered up. The tiny URL, if you couldn't make it work, is lesson bits. I don't know why that's not supposed to be covered up that way. I apologize. Okay. Everyone has their lesson snippet picked and their T-chart. Okay. So these are the questions we're thinking about, right? So on your T-chart, you could just write will not if you want, or whatever you want to put on your headings. And now I got to go back. I'm making some adjustments on the fly here. You're getting lots of previews. Okay. So this is the first one. I'll just talk about it for a second, and then I'll let you think about it. The questions we want to ask are, so this is probably what do we think? Maybe 6 to 10 minutes of instruction-ish, right? Not even. Yeah, probably because you're modeling writing the sentence, right? So this is a shared writing of a summary. Now, this happens to be from 5th grade, but I've seen this routine. We've all seen this routine. You do it in kindergarten too, right? This like, let's come up with the next sentence. Let's write it down together, right? This is what the curriculum gives the teacher. So what we have to do to unpack the complexity is we have to think about what are the little tiny moves that a teacher might make? What might they do or say as they're actually enacting this in their classroom? How are they actually doing the think, pair, share? How are they deciding who to call on? How are they writing the sentence, right? We've seen teachers do that all sorts of different ways. Or do they have an idea in their head about what the sentence should be and they kind of hear the kids' ideas but then make it their own? Or do they use the kid language? These are all the tiny, tiny micro moves that a teacher makes, often without really thinking about it, that really matter for how this comes to life, right? You've all seen it. We've all done it as teachers. So here's what I want you to think about with the example that you picked. Brainstorm together. What are some ways what might this teacher do or say or not do or say? What does the teacher, or that would either bring your list to life or have the potential to contribute to your list of what you're hoping for kids? And what could they do? We've all seen these that would just be like, oh, why did you say that? Why did you do that, right? Why are you reading that comment from my dad, right? Those comments we've all heard of like, ooh, that just sent a message about reading that we really don't want to send. All right, so using the example you picked, see what comes up. Imagine teachers bringing this to life. What are the different ways they might do it? Okay, I'm going to pause you for one moment. You're going to get to keep talking. I just want to pause you. Coaching. Coaching. Okay. Keep going. You're doing the ideas that are surfacing in your conversations are so powerful. Here's what I want to do. I want you to pick one person from your table to be a spy, so to speak, not a spy, collaborator. Will you send that person to walk around and gather some ideas from other posters, okay? So the group at the table can keep working, but send someone to see what are other people thinking about that we didn't think about yet. See if you can find 3 new ideas. Okay, I'm going to ask you to find your seats. Coaching. 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 Okay. Can I see just a show of hands? Raise your hand if you thought of something you hadn't thought of before in terms of what you might look for in classrooms. Something you hadn't really thought about before that you might really look for next time you're in a classroom. Can you raise your hand? I see a few hands. Oh, there we go. Okay. I was like, I'm sure it has to be more than that. All right. This is one way to just process for a second, like, what are the little moves that would really bring this 10, 15 minutes to life, right? And what are the little moves that would, over time, contribute to kids really not seeing themselves as readers and writers in the way we're hoping to, right? It's the little moves over time. We just looked at tiny snippets, right? That's 10 minutes of instruction for most of those things, maybe. And from across the literacy block, I purposely did that. I would encourage you to do this with the other snippets. We don't have time today, but see what else surfaces for you as you think, again, we have to bring together the whole literacy block. The whole literacy block tells kids about who they are as readers and writers, not just one piece of it. So that's where we're going to go next with the third little routine for ourselves. So I'm calling this routine Zoom Out. Here's what we tend to do, and I think actually the coaching cycle can push us to do this even more. We focus on the little piece that we're there to support them with. And we don't zoom out to say, how does this fit within everything else that's happening in the classroom? And that's key if we're thinking about how are all the moves knitting together over time to support kids to see themselves as the readers and writers we want them to. So often we kind of think, well, that part of the lesson, right, this shared writing or this phonics piece, that went great. Trap one is this idea that learning is the technical acquisition of knowledge and skills. So that means I successfully supported you to learn if you did this fluency activity correctly. Wait, that's part of learning. But that is not the whole picture. And if we think about learning in that way, then we just focus on the little thing that happened, right? Oh, look, these kids were really happy in this 10-minute part of my day. And I got them to correctly engage in the activity that I was hoping them to. They did the fluency activity correctly. They showed me the phonics skills I was hoping to show them. What happens if we zoom out? Okay, this also connects to this trap number 3. So zoom out helps us not fall into these traps. That's what this routine is going to help us with. So here's where I want you to, in a moment, we're going to keep adding to our list, but I'm just going to walk through some of these questions, but think about them in relation to the snippet that you were focused on, okay? For this learning activity to have the impact we're hoping for on kids, the first layer is just what needs to happen the 15 minutes before, the 15 minutes after. For that 10 minutes to have the impact we want on kids, what needs to happen, just that little window right around it. Or we can zoom out farther. What about earlier in the day? What about later in the day? This is the part where I'm hoping your brain goes a little bit to how the classroom feels for a kid matters for how they engage in that 10 minutes. Whether they had breakfast or lunch, which is a real threat to some kids right now. I can't not say that. Matters for those 10 minutes of instruction, okay? We can zoom out farther what needs to happen earlier in the school year, what needs to happen later in the school year. Because no single move makes the difference for kids, no single lesson makes the difference for the kids. It's all of it together, right? What culture does the teacher need to have in their classroom? What relationships does she need to have? What connections does she need to have with families? What connections does she need to have with colleagues? That's the level I want you to zoom out to here. Not just what's happening in terms of her interactions with kids necessarily, but also more broadly for that 10 minutes to actually bring to life what we want to, okay? There's one other way you might zoom out. I just want to name it. If you were thinking about a small group, we've all seen this. The small group might be going really well, but the rest of the class, that's an important way to zoom out too. We cannot just coach into how do you do a super great small group lesson without supporting them to think about what the rest of the class is doing that whole time, right? All right, so you're going to add to your posters, or some people, you might need to add a second poster. Again, it's this lens of every small move we make the whole school year matters. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by this. I just want you to feel intrigued by it, okay? We don't have to write down everything, but what does this bring up for us? So, this was a point I wanted to make. This is why it's really important, actually, that Essential Practice 1 says something like this. Avoids attempting to incentivize reading through non-reading related prizes. What message does that send to kids? Or using reading as a punishment. I might have the best reading lesson, but if they then use reading as a punishment, what's going to stick stronger in a kid's head, right? So that's just one example. But it struck me, I hadn't thought about why that was in the essential practices before, and this is why. Okay? So at your tables, either add to your poster or have a new poster. You can stick with the same snippet if you want. If you feel excited to pick a different little lesson snippet, go for it. But use this lens now. What else would you add? It's not going to be complete, but what comes up for you?
Okay, I'm gonna bring you back together. Coaching. 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 All right. Again, I would encourage you to embrace this feeling of non-closure. You could probably keep going. I do want you to take a moment to just think about what did this zooming out bring up to you that was different than when we were really zoomed in the first time, right? Those are really different things that come up for us when we are looking at different layers of it. In a moment, we're going to head to break, and on your way, we're going to have someone from your table go find a wall space to put your poster on. So I'd encourage you at break, take a moment to look at a few other posters. And here's what I want to emphasize, and I want to connect it to a question that came up that's super important. Someone asked, it sounds like you're discrediting research. I want to be super clear that that is not what I'm doing. Let me go back to really make this clear, and I want to connect it to what you have on your posters. And sorry, this is really ridiculous. Okay. Look, this is all the things we've done. Okay. Research is crucial. I am a researcher. I find research to be immensely valuable. But again, research tells us the pieces of the puzzle. I can guarantee you there's not a single study that tells us how to do what you wrote on your poster. Okay? Partly because that's way too complex to try to study in a meaningful way, because teacher jobs and your jobs are way too hard to fully study the complexity of. So I'm not discrediting research. If anything, I'm trying to say, add your knowledge to research. Research is a tool for your practice, or it's a tool for developing curriculum for our practice. It's really important. And also, no study or research tells us how to put it all together in a way that will really be powerful for kids, okay? So we're talking over here about like teachers reading curriculum like a robot, right? That does not bring this to life for kids. And there's no great study that I know at least of really how to support teachers to make sense of our curriculum and enact it in a way that's really powerful and true to them and true to the kids in their room, right? That's the work you have to do with individual teachers and their classrooms. So I'm not discrediting research. Please do not hear that in what I'm saying. I'm saying your knowledge and your roles matter immensely alongside research. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to take a break. We're going to come back at, what time is it? We're going to come back at 10:35. And on your way to break, please put your poster somewhere on a wall so that everyone can take in the good thinking. Okay, we have a lot more to think about together. Coaching. 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 If you could find your seats, please. If you could find your seats, please. Okay, I hope you had a chance to glance at the posters. We'll leave them up all day because if you didn't yet, please go look. There is such a wealth of wisdom and experience in this room about what really matters in classrooms, so definitely take a look. I want to make one more point, actually, that as I was thinking over the break, one more point about this, this point I'm trying to make about research. So here's the other thing that we forget about research. There's a million questions we could ask. People only ask some of the questions, okay? So an example that I've wrestled with a lot, for instance, is in the organizational practices, essential number 10 is that we should have summer school. Okay, there are studies that show that kids who go to summer school sometimes have their reading scores go up. Great. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I'll put that out there. But also, where's the study of what if kids get to go to parks and libraries and play all summer and engage in art projects all summer? What happens to reading scores then? No one has studied that. There are so many questions that we have not studied, and that's the other piece that I'm trying to make about your expertise and your wisdom. You've been in classrooms, you know things that work for kids. Research hasn't studied all those things. We also know that different things work for different kids. Or different classes. I had some really different groups of kids in my teaching career, right? Some things worked really well one year, did not work for the next class. So that's what we know that research doesn't get to. That's the point I'm trying to make. Research is a tool, but we have to think about how it fits into the bigger puzzle that we know is the truth of classrooms. That's my point. All right. We are going to go back through what we all went through again. Here we go. Remember all this? Oh my goodness. Okay. We're going to move on to the fourth. Oh my gosh, I'm regretting all of my animations. Okay. Here's the fourth step, or the fourth routine. To figure out how to get somewhere new, we have to know where we're starting. We have to articulate the difference between where we are and where we want to be. That's a step we miss sometimes. We just say, this is the goal we have for teachers. We don't say, this is what we're trying to get teachers to do less of, and this is what we're trying to get teachers to do more of. We just say where we're trying to go. We don't articulate where we're starting, okay? So here's what I want you to discuss at tables, or if you're in the virtual space, you can engage in the chat. What are some differences between the vision of teaching and learning that we've been discussing when we've been trying to think about how to bring to life, and what you're seeing in classrooms? What are some shifts we're going to need to support teachers with if they're going to bring their new curriculum to life in a way that actually changes what kids are experiencing? So these sentence frames might help you. You can say it in another way too. We might say we want teachers to do less and more, or we want teachers to stop, please stop, and start. But let's actually try to name some shifts that we're trying to support teachers with this year based on the work we've just done. So don't leave behind the last three steps. The last three steps should inform this step. When we come back together, we're all going to write down one shift in the Slido that we're really thinking about so that we can see the complexity of the work we're all trying to support teachers with this next year. But first, discuss in your tables what shifts come to mind. Okay, I'm going to bring you back together. Coaching. 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 These are hard conversations to stop. I heard a lot of you also starting to move already to, what might I do to support that shift? I love that your brain's going there. Let's sit with the shift for a little longer, though. We're going to unpack the complexity of it. So I want us to put up, part of what I want to name for you today is why your jobs are so hard. So can we all write down one challenge? Or sorry, yeah, one shift that feels really challenging or important to you this coming school year. Well, we all write it down. And then I'd actually love to put some into the room if people would be willing to share. There's some microphone friends that can help us. I would love to just say some of them out loud to name the work that we're doing in the state. Brave volunteers. What shifts are you thinking about? Here we go. Thank you. And I only see 33 people typing, and there's a lot more than 33 people in here.
Okay. Well, wasn't the whole table, but most of us want to stop, have or do less of having teachers plan in silos and more planning collaboratively, and hopefully give them time to do that, even though they have a little bit of time on their prep, but not enough.
Support teachers to plan together. That is an immensely challenging shift. Can we have a few more out in the room? Oh, perfect.
We were thinking we would support teachers in focusing less on quantity and more on digging deep in quality instruction.
Super challenging and super important.
Well, we all independently arrived at we need to help teachers talk less and let kids engage and help them to help kids engage with each other more.
What a big one and what an important one and what a hard one, right? Teachers talking less. We tend to have these ideas that we're only teaching if we're talking. My principal, when I was a 5th grade teacher, would say it was a really clear sign to her about where a teacher was in their thinking about their role if she walked in and kids were in discussion or working or in small groups, and the teacher would say, "Oh, I wish you'd come in when I was teaching." Fascinating, right? These deep ideas we have about what teaching means. I'm only teaching if I'm delivering you information. I would encourage you with that really important thing to think about the next level. Here's how we tend to try to help teachers to tell less. We tell them a lot about the need to tell less. Okay? We have to do our jobs differently if we want them to do their jobs differently. So what is the learning that would support them to experience and make sense of the power of telling less? That's going to be what helps them tell less, not whatever magical words you come up with, right? Super important. So really big, important shifts here that are going to really matter for kids. Okay, these really matter if I think about my Oliver. These matter for him. These matter for all the kids you were picturing. And they're really hard. I want to name that too. I did want to call out a connection someone made that they were making a connection to Steve's current state, future state. I just want to name, like, hopefully some of this doesn't feel new to you. It might be slightly different words, but these routines of how we think about our work really matter for how we do our jobs and the kind of learning we support for people. All right, we're going to go back to the slides. So these are the four little routines we just went through. I want to name that it's really important to have number 1 as a foundation. Once you have number 1, though, it might be something you can just refer back to, right? Or is actually kind of just present in your mind. You don't have to do it every time if it's just you. If you're working with a new team of people, make sure you do number 1. Number 2, 3, and 4 can kind of happen in different orders, right? Depending on what you're thinking about, depending on what you're working on. Apply it as makes sense for your thinking. So experiment with, when is it useful for me to zoom out? When is it useful for me to really apply this lens of what will bring it to life, what will not? These are routines we can build into our thinking, okay? So all of this is necessary, I would argue, to be able to do number 5, which is, so what will teachers need to learn? And here's where I want to name a trap we fall into as we just do number 5. We skip right to number 5 and we don't think about 1, 2, 3, 4. So in a moment, we're going to dig into number 5, and I want you to just notice what is coming up for you that maybe doesn't usually come up for you when you try to think about goals for teacher learning. How are you thinking about it in a new way now that we've done steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, or routines? Okay, so what will teachers need to learn? What happens if we apply the same knowing, doing, and becoming to teachers? So again, I want to remind you, this is your pink card in your design cards. This is actually something that's really important. Do we think about kid learning the same as we think about teacher learning? We're all just people learning. It's actually, I'll just name a personal pet peeve of mine, just to name it. I can't not. I actually hate the term adult learning principles because it makes it seem like adults are different kinds of learners than kids. We're just all learners, okay? So what happens if we think about knowing, doing, and becoming for teachers? What happens if we think about not just the knowledge they need or the skills they need? That's where we do a lot of telling. What happens if we also think about who we want them to see themselves as? So what do we hope teachers see themselves and their role in relation to reading, writing, learning, the classroom, school, community, society? Do they see themselves as preparing the next generation of grown-ups in our world? Or do they see themselves as someone who helps a kid pass a test? That's going to really matter for how they enact our charts here, right? That's what shapes which side of the T-chart you fall into as a teacher. It's not, did you get all the knowledge and skills in a PD? It's what do you see your role as? Do you see your role as to foster students' love of reading? Or do you see your role as, I need to make sure I read this lesson correctly in the curriculum? I want to name that our systems push teachers to be the teachers they don't want to be often. It did for me. I taught in 2 different schools. I was 2 totally different teachers because of the system around me, right? We've all experienced that. So again, it's this intersection, okay? So we can't just focus on one. We have to just think about how is it at the intersection. So let's just use this kind of simple example, right? So we just had think, pair, share, or sometimes it's called turn and talks in that example lesson we looked at. If our goal is to use turn and talks to expand participation and engage students in each other's ideas, this is a goal we have for teachers. That requires some knowing. That requires some knowledge, like what even is a turn and talk or a think, pair, share. I need to know that. There's a lot of, and I want to name, this is where it gets messy. Things don't fall exactly in knowing or doing. It's just a way to break it apart for our brains, right? So I actually need to know what are good questions for turn and talks. When do you use them? I was talking to a math leader yesterday, and she said, when I first did turn and talks, I was asking questions like, what's 2 + 2? And then they would say 4. And then that would be the end of the turn and talk. Right? She was trying to do a turn and talk, but she needed to do some learning still about when do you use it? What are the good questions for it? And then this piece of how the heck do you develop norms that make it actually work? We all know that's what stops a lot of teachers from doing it because it feels messy and hard to get kids to move their bodies on a carpet, right? So there's a lot of knowing and doing there. If we just focus on that, though, it's not enough. We've all seen that. I have to see my job as it's my role to facilitate student discussion and engagement in each other's ideas. If I think my job is just to tell kids things, why the heck would I do a turn and talk? I wouldn't. So when we see teachers not doing practices like this, we have all sorts of reasons we come up with in our heads. I would encourage you to add this. What do they think their role is? That's a curiosity to apply to that. What do they think their role is, and how is that stopping them from doing this? Okay? So I want you to just zoom in. I want to name the full routine here, and it's on your pink card on the back, is to actually do what we just did here but like put as many Post-its on it as you can. Or write as many ideas as you can for knowing, doing, and becoming, all of it, okay? That's the full routine. I want us to just focus on the becoming piece for right now, because that's the new piece. So we've been thinking a lot about kid learning. I want us to zoom up now and think about, what do we need teachers to see themselves as? What do we need to see their roles as? If they're going to fall on our left-hand side of our columns on our T-charts, right? Let's try to name some of that. So we're going to discuss at tables, and then we're again going to share some ideas with each other. Okay, I'm going to bring you back together. Coaching. Coaching. All right, again. This conversation is going to feel not finished. I do just want you to sit with how did that conversation feel different than other conversations you've had with each other in the past, maybe about teacher learning. It's interesting to notice how we fall into habits of the kinds of conversations we have, and then that shapes what we can do for teachers, which shapes what they can do for kids. So again, for kids to experiencing something different, we actually all the way up at the coach level, and I also think a lot with I think every leader needs to do this learning. We have to do our jobs differently. We have to have different conversations. We need to have different routines for our work. We need to have different ways of thinking about teacher practice and what matters. So I'm excited to see these. No, I didn't have a Slido here. I actually would just like to put some ideas into the room then. Can we say some things out loud about what we're hoping teachers see themselves as? I want to put these out into the room to develop a shared vision here of like, what is this dream we have for how teachers see their roles? Can we have some brave volunteers? Curious about learning and learners. Leaders. Facilitators. Risk takers. Oh, their voice matters. Isn't that so depressing that that's not true right now? Others? Efficacy, joy. Vulnerable. I heard someone saying, I want them to see themselves as learners. How much do teachers see themselves as performers? And how much does that get in their way? Any other ideas we want to make sure are in the room here? Yeah. Providers of opportunities. That's really different than deliverer of information. Ooh, designers of opportunities. We're revising as we go here. Designers of opportunities. Any other ideas? Cultivators? Innovators? People like that one. This is not inconsequential, right? If we forget this piece, I think what you all said, if I saw myself as that kind of teacher, I would want to keep teaching. I think let's be real, those are not the messages society and our systems give to teachers about who they are. I actually get super uncomfortable in most movies that show teaching because it does not show good teaching. But that's there, right? And here we are talking about how you teach the way you experience teaching. This is actually really important. No other profession, well, I think parenthood is not necessarily a profession, but similar. No other profession do you observe closely that profession for years. K-12, you add years before and after. We observed teachers closely as children. We were constantly there. We received the script. We don't do that with doctors. We see doctors like occasionally. We don't do that with my son likes to watch the dishwasher repair guy, but most of us don't, right? We don't closely observe any other profession. So that's part of what makes your job so hard, is that teachers come in with these deeply embedded scripts about what it means to be a teacher, down to these tiny moves, right? What do you do when a kid has a wrong answer? What do you do when a kid reads a word wrong? What do you do when a kid spells a word wrong? What do you do when a kid shouts out? What do you do when a kid won't sit still? These are things we learned, and so then we need support unlearning them and learning something different. All right, so this is another step we often don't take. We're going to move to number 6. So often we say, where I love that apparently we have been thinking about what's the current state. That's great. We think about where are we now and what's the goal. And then here's the trap we fall into. So here's how this can look. See if any of this is familiar. So we think someone doesn't have something. So I'm going to deliver this perfect thing, and then they're going to have it. It's going to be amazing. Okay? Does this feel, so every time I say that, everyone laughs, and it's a laugh, I think, of recognition. See if any of the examples feel familiar. For students, I'm just going to deliver the perfect phonics activity, and then they're going to be magically fixed. Okay? Or here's what we're grappling with today. I'm going to give teachers a new curriculum. The shiny boxes are going to show up in their classroom, and they're going to teach so differently. Or I'm just going to, this 90-minute PD I have in August, it's going to be amazing. It's going to change everything. And I want to name here that this is how the systems keep things the same, because you're only given 90 minutes. That's not your choice, right? Or the example of wanting teachers to collaborate more, I heard over here, that's not built into the system. Okay? Let's just do a book study. That'll fix everything. Again, I'm not saying any of these things are bad on their own, but if we think they're going to magically fix everything, we're just wrong. We've all experienced this, right? Okay, I want you to sit with this one. Do you fall into this trap? I think our system pushes you into this trap. Teacher doesn't have something, I will do the best coaching cycle I can possibly do, and then it will be magically fixed. I have fallen into that trap. I will very loudly say I've fallen into that trap. This is a trap I think we fell into as a state. There's some laughing for that one, okay? This is something we do, and especially it's true of this goes back to our how things are sold to us thing from the very beginning. Letters was sold to us as a thing that would fix everything, that did everything that nothing had ever done before. We thought as a state, if we just give everyone that, then magically everything will be better. Okay, we do this with leaders too. We're going to give leaders a really well-planned 90-minute PD, or we're going to revise that email 10 times to make it the best it could possibly be, and then they will have it. I do that. Here's another thing we do. We give them checklists for what to look for in classrooms. That'll magically fix it. Again, none of these things are bad on their own, but none of these things support the complex learning we've been talking about. None of these things on their own change what's happening for kids in classrooms, but we act like they will. And again, that's not anything bad about individuals. This is the recipe the system gives us, right? Even right now, there's a real risk of us falling into this trap as a state. We're saying, reading hasn't improved. The answer is we just need to have everyone have a high quality curriculum. That will fix it. That's the trap we could fall into right now. So that's kind of a linear, we go from here to here, magic, there's a magic carpet taking us there, right? That's not how learning happens. So sometimes learning happens like this. And we're moving into our blue card if you're wanting, or teal card if you're wanting to follow along in the design cards. Sometimes learning happens like this, but often it's like this. Or like this. There's a lot of times it's like this. Sometimes it's just like that, right? All of us, if we think about any time we learned anything, it's one of these things. It's not like this straight A to B line. So here's a tool that's been really useful for us in the math world as just a framework for helping us step back and say, what actually is the complexity of teacher learning? So this comes from a study of, in this case it was math teachers, but I have found this applies to any educator in any role, teaching any content area, leading anything. It even applies to our own, someone was applying this to their own learning of how to make sourdough bread yesterday, okay? It applies to all sorts of things in our life. See what this brings up for you. So this was a study of math teachers trying to be supported to enact a new curriculum. So there's often a phase of resistance, not for everybody. So on a name, everyone's progression through this is really different. This is not like everyone goes ABC, okay? When people resist something, when teachers resist a new curriculum or a new teaching practice, they don't do it, right? We know that part. But the interesting thing I think here is the why. And there's actually a lot of reasons why someone might not. They might see it as kind of arbitrary, like, why the heck would I do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. Or constraining, like that makes it really hard to do what I believe is good for kids or what I've done for the last 10 years, or I literally don't have time in the day for that, right? Ineffective, maybe. Unreasonable. Or sometimes unattainable. I don't know how to do that. We can all think, I see people nodding, I'm sure you're all thinking of different teachers in your head or yourself, that different times you've resisted something for these range of reasons. And it's actually really important. In a moment, we're going to think of the range of kind of resistance we might see this year. It's important to think about the range of it because how you support those different learners will be different based on what their resistance, the reason for their resistance is. If the teacher thinks it's ineffective, that's a different thing I need to do to support their learning than if they think it's unattainable. Or if they think it's unreasonable, okay? So then we also see compliance. So compliance is on the top left there. Here's what's important about compliance. And this is the robot reading, we were talking about robot reading over there. You walk in and teachers are enacting the new practice. See if this feels familiar, but it's really superficial or inflexible. They are going through the script they were given. They're doing the things. Actually, if the principal came in with their magic checklist we gave them, the principal would think, oh, they're doing it. But here's key, they're doing it out of obligation to others. They're doing it because they were told to do it. Not because they believe it. They're doing what the script told them to do, not because they're actually thinking about it. And key here is it seems still really kind of arbitrary and maybe unattainable to them. They're like, I don't get this, but sure, I'll do it because you told me to. And they don't adapt it in meaningful ways for their kids in their classroom. We've all seen that. How is that different than internalization? So notice the words over in internalization. The educators are enacting it in responsive and flexible ways. They're adapting it to the kids in front of them. They're being maybe a little playful with it. Over here we were talking about how like your energy you bring to something impacts how kids experience it, right? And key here is they're doing it out of obligation to self. So this is the difference, and this is where becoming helps us understand this. This is the difference between I'm doing turn and talks because I was told that turn and talks are a thing to do versus I can't imagine not giving kids a chance to talk to each other because it's so important. That's the difference. And here I see the expectations as reasonable, as enabling. They really help me. They're powerful. They're negotiable is key. I know where I have wiggle room to adapt for my kids. And I see it as attainable. I can do it. Okay? So it's key to notice the difference between compliance and internalization and think about what are the things we would see a teacher doing or hear a teacher saying that would help us see where they're at here. Now, I want to say something crucial. Compliance is not bad. I want you to sit with that for a second. What if I told you compliance is actually a necessary step? So we have the teacher reading the script. It's not in their closet. I have something to work with now. I can help them figure out how to bring it to life because it's not in their closet, right? They've decided to make time for it in their day. Now I can help them think about how to be responsive and flexible with it. The other piece of it is I actually have to experience something for it to feel meaningful to me. If I see it as enabling and powerful, I have to have experienced that. Okay? So if I'm given a new, we'll go back to the example of turn and talks just as it's concrete. The first few times I do turn and talks, I'm like, I'm just doing it. But then I start to see, wow, kids are really talking to each other. And then when I come back to whole discussion, there's new ideas surfacing. Or, wow, I can go listen into turn and talks and get access to way more kids thinking than if I just have kids raise their hand and talk one by one. And that actually supports me then to say, hey, Michelle, will you share your idea when we come back whole group? And maybe Michelle hasn't felt comfortable sharing before in my class, but now maybe she feels like, sure, maybe I could. Okay? I, as a teacher now, have experienced that's really powerful. That helps me teach kids in the way I want to teach them. Now I can't imagine doing turn and talks any other way or not doing a turn and talk, right? That's the difference between compliance and internalization, and that's an example of why compliance is actually necessary. So when we walk into classrooms and we see compliance, we cannot look at that through a deficit lens. We see it as, okay, they're in compliance. What am I going to do to nudge them towards internalization? All right, that was a lot. I want you to get up and find a friend and just talk to them about what this is bringing up for you.
share this trajectory with teachers. Is what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that's helpful as they're going through this space? So that was the online question I wanted to bring to you. And then I'm like, I'm ready up here. It's like, is it better for me to?
Okay, please find your seats. Coaching. 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 Can you please take your seats? Can you please take your seats? Again, these are conversations I hope continue. There's a couple of things that surfaced that were so rich for me. So one thing, if I can get the slide back up. I use the example of compliance as the robot reading the script. I want to be clear, there's so many different ways that compliance can look. That was one example. Ashlyn gave me another example. We go in and do a teaching cycle, or observation cycle, we actually see a lot of progress with practices. They're actually starting to teach differently. And then we leave. And what happens? They go back to the way they were doing it, okay? That's compliance because it's obligation to others. I'm doing it because you were watching me, but I don't believe in it yet. Okay? There's a lot of ways that compliance can look. The key thing is to really zoom in on these couple words that are highlighted. Is the teacher doing it because they think you think they should do it, or the principal thinks they should do it? Or are they doing it because they deeply believe in it? That's one piece. And then, do they see it as something they can be a little flexible with, or do they see it as something they have to really just follow the steps? That's what you look for any kind of part of their practice. Are they doing it because they believe in it, or are they doing it because they were told to do it, right? And we can think about this for anything. Even think about the ways we teach teachers to greet kids when they come in the morning, right? You can see teachers do, I'm thinking about teachers I've seen at my son's school, I'll do a fist bump or whatever. There's teachers where you're not actually greeting the children. And then there's teachers where wow, that was a real moment of connection you just had. We've seen that, right? It's in the tiny ways that people enact these things. The teacher who really connects, they're seeing it as a useful thing in their practice. The teacher who is just not even looking at the kids, right? They're this is something I was told is good teaching, so I'll just do it, I guess. Okay, that's the difference between compliance and internalization. Now I asked Ashlyn if she'd be willing to share the thought that came to her because of that, and I'll just hand you my mic down here.
So as reflecting on that compliance piece, and it's how the question that I was thinking about reflecting on is how do we make sure that our leaders are part of that conversation for that compliance? The system has to support the classroom teacher, the system has to support the coach, because the coach cannot keep going back to that same teacher and trying to see if they're gonna just do compliance or internalize it. And so how do we expand that learning? So that was the thinking. I'm sure maybe you don't have those experiences. You coach a teacher and they just flower on, but in some cases, that's not the case.
Thank you. So that's super important. And this is a way, if I can go back to my so I actually want to have it say teachers. We can put coaches in that box. or in the star thing. Okay? I don't have to tell you that the system around your teachers matters a lot and you spend most of your time fighting against it. I don't have to tell you that. You experience that on a daily basis, right? I deeply believe that principals need learning. I've been starting to work with superintendents. We all have to do this learning because the system keeps teachers where they are. There is no way in one coaching cycle you can get a teacher to internalization with all of the things you're hoping to get them to an internalization on, right? Maybe one or two little things, depending on the teacher. Now I'm regretting all my animations again. I'm going backwards. That's not useful. Okay, and then Heather, I don't know where you were. Oh, you had a question you were going to raise that is also important.
Working, but in the Slido, the question was, should we share, what are your thoughts on sharing this trajectory with teachers to help them understand what's happening with their own learning?
Should we share the trajectory with teachers? I'm really curious to hear some thoughts from the room about this, actually. What's coming up for you? We have one here. She's bringing you a mic. 1 second. Okay, I know we're starting to talk at tables. I just want to hear a couple thoughts because we have to move to the next thing still.
So my first thought when thinking about sharing the trajectory with teachers is sometimes teachers are, and myself included when I was in the classroom, are afraid to be messy, that it needs to look perfect. And it may give them that nudge of, it's okay, like this is meant to be messy. Look at these lines, they're not perfectly straight. I'm not gonna go from point A to point B without a bunch of stops along the way. So that might work for some staff to give them that permission that it's going to be messy.
Anybody else have a thought? Oh, here, perfect.
We simply just said transparency builds trust.
Yeah.
I think even in the in showing teachers this trajectory, that resistance piece, teachers may not know even that they are being resistant, and so giving them examples of what that resistance could look like. Oh, I actually am doing that. If it's being messy, or if it's I don't want to do something new, or I have too much on my plate, just giving them examples of what resistance looks like so they realize where they fall, maybe.
Over here.
Yeah, and I think to go along with a lot of those is just naming it. Sometimes teachers don't realize, like they've already stated, naming it, giving examples, and allowing teachers time to reflect on where they're at, because even as coaches, sometimes we need the people around us to name it and say, in a safe space, obviously, but again, just giving it a name and saying, where can I go from here to make myself stronger or better?
There's some more back here.
Oh, I have a mic over here if you want to.
Here.
While
Sorry,
we're waiting.
it's hard for me to see what I'm looking
yes,
for.
I absolutely think we should share that with teachers because it helps with that sense of autonomy and efficacy that we say we always want. And if we aren't transparent and they don't know what we're going for, then we're kind of hiding the whole objective from them and stealing their autonomy and efficacy.
Is it on? Okay, it made me think about what you said earlier, like not adult learning principles, like we're all learners, all people are learners. It might also help them see this in their students. Like the student isn't resisting to be mean, like there's a reason for it. We're pushing them outside their comfort zone. Then they may just follow it for a little bit, but we can help them get to, oh, I see what this connection is, instead of just giving up or sending them out of the room because they're not listening to us.
Yes. Oh, yes. Over there. And then we'll pause.
I'm going to raise this on behalf of Laura Chang from Kalamazoo Reset, and she said, I'm wondering about implementation agreements. Our district often creates these for new curriculum. Where does that fit in with this? Does compliance always lead to internalization? Are these agreements harmful or helpful?
So I don't know exactly what the agreements look like, so I can't speak to that part. But I can speak to, does compliance always lead to internalization? And I see everyone not shaking their heads. Okay, what do I want to say here? So no, it doesn't. People get stuck in compliance all the time. They go back to resistance all the time. Again, I use this like, someone told me in, I think Oakland, they call it the squiggle, if you want to start using that. I use the squiggle. It's even too simple, right? We're not always moving up. These other things happen all the time. We've all seen them. Compliance does not always lead to internalization. I'm going backwards again. It requires really specific work on our parts, actually. And we're not going to have time to get into that today. I'm hoping that's the conversation we can start having across the year and into the next year. We're just digging into like, how do we need to think about our goals for teacher learning today? That's all we're getting to, okay? That's really important to stop and sit with, because what it's surfacing already is, oh, we have to really think about our jobs in different ways, and we have to think about our systems for teachers in different ways, okay? So I want to name, if that's feeling like, I don't know how to do that, that's actually where I want you to be right now. I want you to sit in that, what do I need to do differently? Here's what I'll say about showing it to teachers. Think really carefully about how you are doing it. So the answer is not, yes, always share it with teachers. It matters how we share it. It matters the language we use. It also, I would say, matters the culture of the school. It matters how the teacher thinks about tools that are put in front of them. For some people, it might be that you're just showing these things. You're just bringing, I hear the idea of being transparent. That's super important. But we can have that conversation even here without putting labels on it, okay? Sometimes the labels are helpful, sometimes they're not. I'm not saying don't do it or do it. I'm saying be really thoughtful about how you do it. I think there's also ways without showing the exact language to talk about, and we're going to do an activity in a moment, we're going to build a trajectory. That could be a way to say, like, when we're learning something new, what does it look like? How messy does it get? I love this idea about helping this be a lens for kids. I will say that. That is really useful, that resistance, these words about resistance are really useful. Are kids seeing something we're trying to teach them as arbitrary? Often they are. Constraining? Ineffective? Like, why would I even do that? My son is the kid who's like, that's really boring. Why would I do that? Okay? So if it seems useful, you know your teachers. If it seems useful to share in a really thoughtful conversation, absolutely do it. Also, this can just be a lens you use for thinking about your work. That is a totally fine thing to just have it be a lens you use for your practice. And I would also say, let's be careful not to label teachers with this. We are never, as a full human, in internalization for everything. Never, right? We can zoom in on certain practices like, with turn and talks, I'll just keep using that example. I think that's kind of out of compliance right now, but I'm noticing some spots where it's starting to move towards internalization. Okay? That's really different, and it helps you think about your next moves in a really different way than if you just say that teacher isn't doing it or that teacher is teaching it like a robot. Those are really different words to put into your thinking space about your teacher, and really going to shape how you engage with your teacher in different ways, okay? So with all these tools, the answer is not yes or no. It depends how. Please be really thoughtful about how you bring any of this to teachers. They are not magic tools. It matters how we use them. All right. I want to make sure we have time for this activity. I want to name that this is the routine. We're going to try the routine that's on the back of the teal card, just so you know that I'm like directly leaning into that. So what this routine has us do is think about how will learning unfold over time? What is the messiness actually going to look like? And this is where you have immense wisdom. You have seen teachers try to change their reading instruction or you've been a teacher trying to change your reading instruction, you actually really know the kinds of things that will happen over time, but we often don't pause to think about them. So this is what we did in math yesterday on Monday with the whole group. We did it on Canva. You can see it's really messy. The point is, look at the wisdom we generated. You don't need to be able to read them. Just look at the wisdom we generated as a group about the messiness of learning along the way, not just what we think the end is going to look like. Okay? I'll zoom in just quickly so you can see a couple ideas that surfaced, right? So they were talking about a teacher in resistance. It might be like they're expressing some confusion or fear. Might sound like they're making excuses. Does this sound familiar? Okay. This is the kind of thing that's useful to write down. Internalization, maybe they're asking more open-ended questions. There's more student talk. There's less teacher talk, right? These are some things we might see or hear. Resistance also can sound like my kids can't do that. Compliance can look like I'm asking the questions, but I don't really understand why I'm asking the question. So I'm reading the question from the curriculum guide. I don't really understand why I would ask kids that question. I'm just asking it and then letting them answer and not really paying attention to what they're saying, but I asked the question, right? Or I thought this one was interesting, blaming the program if something goes wrong. That's actually a really good sign of compliance, right? Because they don't see it as something flexible or adaptable or with meaning. They just see it as something they were told to do. So if it doesn't work, it's really easy to say it was just because of that. All right? So these are some examples of some of the ideas you might generate. So we're going to do something a little bit maybe wild. I don't know. Bear with me. Let's see if we can do it. We're going to lean into this. So if we're trying to make sure that the curriculum this year is not just a new tool that ends up sitting in the closet or making practice exactly the same, if we want it to actually engage kids in more powerful ways, these are the questions we need to ask ourselves. And we're going to have lots of answers to these questions because we work with lots of different teachers and they're all going to look different. And that's what makes our job hard. What will resistance look like or sound like? What are all the different ways it might look like or sound like? Compliance, internalization, and then the key one on the bottom right is what might be evidence of like small shifts that are telling me maybe we're starting to move towards internalization. Those are the ones we want to really notice and latch onto and push forward with. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's see if we can do it. We are going to go into some Google slide decks. Each table, you're going to have your own slide. You'll see in a moment. And there's Post-its ready. You can see on the far right for you to drag and drop and move around, okay? The challenge is we can only have 100 people in each Google slide deck. So here's what I did. I created one for each row of tables. So the first row is going to be the one closest to me. Second row behind, third row behind that, fourth row behind that, and then we have our fifth row in the back. And then virtual friends, you have a slide deck too, okay? So you can choose, everyone can have their computer, or you can have one computer at your table or two. You can decide how many people want to write down your ideas. But what we're going to do is actually try this out. So, oops, I'm going to go back. If our goal is to implement a new curriculum in a way that brings our vision for children as readers and writers to life, what is that actually going to look like for our different teachers that we work with? What might resistance sound like or look like? What might compliance look like, sound like? What might internalization look like or sound like? Do we feel ready to do some collaborative work? What's going to be amazing is we're going to get to see each other's thinking. All right, let's give it a try. Okay, I hate to do this, but coaching. Okay, I want a name that was not nearly enough time. I really deeply hope that you spend more time. You can even come into these slides and look around at what other people put. This is an activity worth doing in teams, by yourself. I want to note that nobody had a hard time coming up with ideas. We've seen this. But what doing this helps us do is notice the little changes that matter and pay attention to different things when we're talking with teachers or working with teachers or seeing their practice, right? We're not just saying, are they doing it or not? We're noticing these more micro moves that they're making, and we're thinking about what that means for where they are in their trajectory and what we might do to then nudge them to the next part, okay? So this was incomplete. I want to name that. Do it on your own. Do it with your teams. Bring it to other groups that you work with. And I want to really emphasize that to this point about, do we show any of these things to teachers? Any of these things could be used with teachers. It really matters how they're framed. Okay? There's going to be a video of this. I kind of don't love that there's videos of me, but they are useful. If you want to go back and listen to some of the language I use to frame some of these tools, that's important. We can frame these tools in ways that end up feeling evaluative or judgmental for teachers. That is not going to support their learning. So the last thing I want you to do right now is run out tomorrow and give it to a teacher. Please don't. Okay? Sit with it, think about it more, have conversations with each other. I'm going to be thinking with Michelle and Heather about how to continue working with you and be able to answer more of your questions, because I know this was a lot in a short amount of time. Do not just run and give it to someone, then you're falling into the trap of the magical tool fixing everything. Let yourself be on your own messy trajectory, okay? If you go and do it tomorrow, you'll be doing it out of compliance. I don't care how excited you feel right now, it will be out of compliance. Because I told you it was a cool thing and it felt good to you in this moment. Do not do that. Take more time to process it. Practice using it as a lens with your teachers. Then maybe think about talking to them about it. But do not do that until you've really made sense of it for yourself, please. And also really, let's think together about the language we would use and how to use this as a tool. So that's the piece we did not get to, right? How do we actually use these tools in our practice? In terms of deciding what to do, we didn't get to that today. So hopefully you did get these two things. One, at least one, new thing you're going to think about when you're in classrooms. And a reflection process you can repeat and try on your own with your teams. Hopefully, eventually some of this just becomes the way you think about the work that you're doing. I do want to put some of those into the room. So if you open the Slido, what's something you want to try? And then the other thing I want to say is in the Slido, there should be there's a questions part, right? There's a Q&A. If you have a question that you did not get answered, please write it there, and I'll figure out with Michelle a way to get those answers to you, okay? Or we'll think about what's the resources that would help you. I know we only scratched the surface here. I see 51 people typing. I know there's more than that. I would really encourage you, for your own learning trajectory, name something new you want to try. And I would really honestly love to see 400 questions in there. That would make me really happy. So if you do have a question that's burning, even if it's half-baked, please write it down because it'll help us think about what the next learning would be that would be useful for you. I'll give you another 30 seconds here. It looks like 53 people are still writing. Can we get some of the responses up, please? Oh. Okay. Apparently we don't get to see the responses. But I do think what would be interesting, and I'll work on this, is I'll be able to see them and we can pull them together because I think this is something you all are going to have to do together, and seeing ideas from each other about what you're going to try and then being able to check in with each other about what you tried and what is working and what's not working is going to be really important for us to do this year, okay? Because that's the way, if we go back to my slides, because I have to wrap up. Sorry, I'm making your life really hard. We started by thinking about our children. If we want things to be different for the kids in Michigan classrooms, this is the way, I mean, this is my opinion. Hopefully I was convincing. We have to think about teacher learning differently. Now, that makes your job really hard because we have to think about doing our jobs in different ways. So again, today we just did these routines for really understanding the complexity of teacher practice. That's all we were able to get through today. It's a crucial first step to keep working on. You're not done. This was not a magic thing I just delivered you, right? You haven't suddenly reached internalization. The next piece is how do we actually bring that into our practice, and what does it mean we need to change about how you enact your roles? And then the key piece is how do we need to change the systems around your roles, which is a much bigger thing, right? But let's also just focus on what you can control. You have really important jobs. Thank you for the work that you do. And I'm so glad that I got to think with you today about how to really support our teachers and our kids. Thank you.